start off with you, Fatima, is just to have kind of, from the other two, I'm interested in their reactions to the film and what they pull from it. But what inspired you to make this film? Could you pass the mic? Yeah. Could you tell us a little bit about the background, please?
Yes, so basically, I have always... Hello? Yeah, so basically, growing up, I've always had questions about why people translate being abroad as being rich or having a status symbol attached to people who have been to any of these Western countries, yes. And also I had a cousin who put all his education aside just to pursue going to Europe. And for him, unfortunately, he couldn't make it. He was stuck in Libya. And along the way, he had to come back home. He was home for 3 years, and none of us knew he was in Ghana, simply because he was shy and didn't want to be seen as a failure. So actually, the research of this film started with him. So it was through the research that I also realized that most of the migration stories are centered around people moving from this part of the world to the Western Europe. So I just said, no, what about me doing something about how we treat returnees? So that's how come I said, no, let me shift the perspective, because at the end of the day, there's so much funding to halt irregular migration to Europe. At the same time, those who decide to come back are treated not worthy. So, I mean, what is the point? Is I saw it to be counterproductive in the fight of irregular migration. So, through my cousin, I got to know Fati, and I took this this side of the story to tell on migration.
Thank you. Abdullah, why don't you talk a little bit about what you take from the film and what your perspective is on the film? I think you've seen it now twice. And introduce yourself, please.
Good morning. My name is Abdullah Osman, and I'm from Arbor Designs from Tamale. First of all, I want to take the opportunity to thank Carina for giving me this a big opportunity, and the African Institutes for this big opportunity. Honestly, the film really reflects the whole of my life, because when I watched the film first time, I was really crying. Because honestly, it's just about me. It's just a picture of me. Because I left Ghana when I finished senior secondary school. So just imagine that I could have done more if I continue schooling. So the film is just about me. So and then it reflects me about my time in Europe, and then when I returned back to Ghana, the feelings I have from friends and family and in the whole community. You understand? So I'll talk more about it. Thank you.
And I guess it's my turn. Good morning. So I think Carina asked me to speak because she knows that I do work on migration. But when I first watched the film, actually, it had a very personal effect on me, because I too have had the same experience. I wasn't going across water. But I defended my thesis on July 31st, 2002. It was a Friday. The following Tuesday, I packed everything, which was really nothing, because I only owned a set of pots of pants, basically. 4 pants, you know. So but I put everything, all my clothes, and I counted Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and left those 5 for my suitcase. And I put everything in a U-Haul and shipped it to Ghana. On Saturday, I went to Chicago. The American Sociological Association had a conference, and I was a participant. So I did my presentation, and then on Monday, I flew back home. My parents were fine with it. I have a very close relationship with my dad. I'd been out of Ghana for 10 years for school. So my father was quite happy that I was coming back home. So I didn't quite get that same response of why have you come when I was here. But everybody in the US thought I was a Looney Tune. Like, why are you going to Ghana? What's wrong with you? And I wouldn't even do that. I wouldn't try the job market to discover whether I would be given a job or not. I just, no. So Gail would ask, are you sure? You know, I'm not looking to discover whether I want an opportunity. I just want to go back home. It got to a point in Ghana where we were doing now I was long enough here that I'd risen through the ranks, and I was now on the interview panels, and we were doing interviews on Zoom. In those days, it wasn't called Zoom. What was it before Zoom? Skype. That one, Skype. We actually had gotten to the point where we interviewed people on Skype, and it was very normal to have people returning. But I still remember the craziness of it. And even when I got to Legon, they're like, okay, you want to teach, but your paperwork will take 6 months. So you teach, but we'll pay you. So I started teaching in August. I actually was interviewed in March the following year, and I can't remember when I got paid. My father was keeping record of how much money he was loaning me and telling me I'll pay with interest. But that story of if you go abroad, you're supposed to stay there, be a Bintu for life, not come back, is one that is not just reflected among lower income Ghanaians like we see with Fati, but those of us so-called better off also have to struggle with, are you going to stay abroad or are you going to come home? And what are people going to think of you, whichever way you make that decision. So thank you, Carina. I wouldn't otherwise have watched the film, but it was so striking for me at a very personal level.
Thank you. Abdullah, I want Fatima has talked a little bit about what inspired her out of her family history, and Akosua coming from a very different place but encountering very similar responses. But you didn't, why don't you tell us a little bit about your story? You wrote in your abstract about what that story entailed, and I think that would help us open up the conversation a little bit to hear your story, if you're comfortable with that.
Yes, I'm quite comfortable with that,
okay,
honestly, because I'm campaigning against illegal migration. Yes, when I was in Germany, because my final destination was in Germany, but I started from the North Africa to the Mediterranean Sea to Spain. From Spain, I worked a bit there, and honestly, I was working in the farm, and the youth could not believe that in Europe there is a place where you can work in a farm just like Ghana. So whenever I call people and I tell them that I'm at work at farm, they don't believe me. They say like, what kind of farm? Is it in a big house where you have? I said, no, it's just in the hot sun. Just in the hot sun, and it's around like 40, sometimes 45, 46 degrees. And people don't believe that. They say, oh no, we know Europe is very cold, around -1 and so. And I told them that not in southern part of Spain, you understand. And then life there was a little bit tough, because like I was hoping that I'm going to heaven, rather than I'm now, sorry to say, in hell. So whenever I tell my family back home the type of job I'm doing, they don't believe me. They always say, Abdullah, you are lazy. You don't want to work. You just want to come home and sit idle. So you better keep trying. We are paying for you. We are always on locks paying for you. You get documents, and life will be better within a few years to come. So all these things will keep motivating me to stay, because they keep telling me that they are paying for me and so. So it takes me some time in Spain, and I decided that it looks like life was not going well there, so let me move maybe to different country. So I talked to a couple of friends, and then they advised me that when you go to Germany, they have factories, they have a lot of industries where you can get a better job there. So I took the opportunity and I moved from Spain to Germany. So when I arrived in Germany, I went to the Ghanaian community, and then I spoke with them about my intention of staying here. Well, they welcomed me very well, and they said, oh, there are opportunities, you will grab some. So I started to look for them, and then I realized that I can't work without German documents. So there another struggle had to start again. So I have to look for German documents, and then I asked them that what are the ways or I can find the documents. They told me that here you can't seek political asylum, because they believe that Ghana is a very peaceful country, and then then you come, and then the best way is here is to marry a German woman to get a German documents. Well, and I look at it as a big problem. I have no interest marrying in Europe, so I look at it to be a very difficult task for me. But they told me that that is the only alternative, or else then I have to go back to Ghana. Well, and I called my mom and we discussed it, and she told me that she will not be happy for me to marry outside Ghana. So, but they are praying for me. There might be other alternatives, so I should stay. So I continued staying, and then I took a colleague Ghanaian documents to look for a job. Finally, I got a job in a bakery where they are like doing bread and so on. So, and then when I find a job, and then I signed the contract and everything was done. So I came back to the guy and told him that, oh, I have successfully gotten a job. He told me that, okay, then let me tell you the rules and the conditions of the papers I've given you. I said, okay. He said, okay, the first one is we are dividing your salary into 3. Well, one goes to you, and then the other one goes to me, and then the remaining one will reserve in case there is a problem. We'll use it to hire a lawyer to defend my documents. Well, I have no other alternative than to accept it. So I started working with these people. Whenever my salary comes, I have to call him that, oh, according to my co-workers, they said they have paid my salary to your accounts. He sometimes tells me that, oh, I have not received your salary yet. So whenever I check and then there is, I'll call you and give your money back to you. So sometimes it may take around like another 10 days before I could get my salary from this guy. Even he's taking almost two-thirds of the money. So, and I was like getting fed up, and I was like getting life very tough. So I decided to quit that place, and then got what we call black jobs, where I was cleaning restaurants and then like train stations and so on. That one I was getting paid through like table, we call it yeah, we call it a tabletop. So I was taking my salary from there. Well, so that was where I started thinking about going back to Ghana. So I'll continue that one.
Well, continue. I think to have the story, so we have then the 2 stories.
Okay, well, so that's where I started thinking about going back to Ghana. So I called my parents and friends so I could seek a good advice, so that if I come back home, I can integrate to the community and I can get a work. And they always said that there is no job in Ghana. All my colleagues are like, they are still sitting, they are not getting job, and their life is still tough. Then I left. So things is still harder, so I should continue staying and hoping that things will change. Well, I was finding it very difficult living without documents. Whenever I'm sick, I have to go to a friend who has a German documents to help me to go to the hospital to get some drugs. Sometimes they might give me different drugs because they look at the history of the persons. You understand, if it's an HIV patient, if it is diabetes and so on, they look at the history of him and then give me the drugs. And I realize that it is getting more complicated and dangerous for me. So I was pushing more to come home. And my parents felt like, whenever I call and talk about that, they start to insult me, like giving me kind of names, and then they said they knew like I could make it, so I should hope, I should have hope in God, and Allah will bless me, and then all sort of things. And I know what I was facing. Well, it takes me another 2 or 3 years when I finally made the decision to come home. This time I did not tell them anything more. So I went to the Ghana Embassy in Berlin, and I told them my story, and I said I want to go back home. So they arranged everything, and then they gave me the opportunity to come. So upon my arrival in Ghana, well, none of my family was in Accra. So I just arrived very safely, and then I arranged myself, and then I moved to Tamale, where I told my mom that I arrived in Ghana and I'm coming back. And honestly, she was not happy about it. Not because she was hoping that I would come with a lot of money, and then so when I told her that honestly, like I didn't bring anything, I just brought my life, and then I'm healthy and so on. Well, so when I arrived in Tamale, and then there was no place for me to stay because the room I was living, they have given it back to some of the family members. So I have to move to pitch with a friend. Well, and the friend was happy because I'm coming from Europe and I've brought a lot of money and I've brought a lot of things. So the next day morning, he asked me a phone, do I bring any phone for him to? And I was really shocked. Because like asking a phone like in this modern, and he said, oh, I believe that in Germany there are a lot of used phones on the streets, so I hope you pick a lot of them and put them in your bag for me. Well, I could not answer him very well. I said, oh, time will tell, because I didn't want to like make him uncomfortable. So the next day I went to the family house and I greeted them and then blah, blah, blah. And then the next thing, one of my uncle asked me that, when will my container arrive? So I couldn't answer that question again. So I said, time will tell. So and then I moved to my mother, and then my mother and we talked a little bit. And honestly, I was open to her, and I told her that, look, honestly, I've not brought anything, and I'm planning to stay, and I have to start scratch again, and I hope with your help and your support I will be able to make it. And she said, okay, she will do all her best. And well, the other family members, I could not tell them anything because I know how hungry they were and how their expectation. You understand? So I could not tell none of them anything. So the next day, and one of a friend, a colleague from school, came to me, and then we talked a bit, and he said, okay, he was planning to come and ask me the ways he can also go to Germany or Spain. I said, okay, time will tell, because honestly, anytime you tell anything bad about Europe or yourself, it becomes an insult and pressure on you. So whatever you say, you have to be careful. So whatever I want to say, I'll just tell them, oh, time will tell, we'll talk about it later. So I started my life in Tamale, and it was really difficult because like people were, when they realized that I brought nothing, most of their attention was gone from me. So I started to move from the area I was to different area because there was no more attention, because when there was wedding, Arbor, funerals, I was no more invited. And when I even come, people look at me as a failure. You have a big opportunity like this, and then you misuse it, and you come and sit with us, trying to believe you that you are you decide to come, not knowing that they have deported you. That's what other people were thinking, that they have deported you. Maybe you have caused a crime and they deported you. So it was really tough for me. So I looked for different areas, and I suited myself with different people, pretending like I was like I never traveled, and I've been the whole of my life in Tamale, and I started to learn how to sew smoke. Yes, so that's where I start how to learn how to sew smoke, and then already before I left Ghana, I was already in Tamale Culture Center, and I was already suited with a lot of tourists, because in my childhood I was doing a lot with tourists and so on. So when I started learning the smoke, and then sometime I moved to the Culture Center where I could play with people, with friends there, and then I could do my work. There I start to meet different people and different, and then whenever I tell my stories, and then they tell me that, oh, you made a best decision. The decision you made is the best ever. You will have a better life here. And we from those who are born in Europe, sometimes like we struggle with life there. Not like you travel from Ghana to Europe and you have a different culture, well, you will make a better life. So most of the people who are like the tourists, they were giving me hope, telling me that I've made the best decision. And some of them was even giving me more opportunity, like buying my stuff and then telling me more about what I can do to stay. And another thing I would thank Ghana German Center for Migration. Well, they also come to my aid, like giving me psychological education, and then also giving me kind of like hope so that I can stay. So I was able to integrate my life in Tamale finally.
Abdullah, thank you for sharing that really powerful story. And I'm struck not by Fati's choice, Fatima, by the story that inspired you. Abdullah's story, the parallels are just striking. But I wanted to ask a question about the parallels, and I raised this with Abdullah, but I'd like to hear from all of you. Are there different experiences for women who take this journey? Is it somehow a gendered experience? Do women have a different experience, and are the expectations different? So what I found so powerful about the film and about Fati's choice is I somehow thought, well, the fact that she was coming back for her children would somehow soften this or mediate it in a way, and it didn't. She was facing this very same criticism and disappointment that young men that we hear about are. So I wondered if any of you had thoughts about that, or all of you. And then I think I want to open it up then.
So I'll go first. The most powerful scene for me is the one where she's sitting with her two friends in 2nd, and they're basically chastising her. So I've done work on Ghanaian migrants to Libya. I've worked in Techiman. And you encounter many, many more men than you encounter women who've migrated. The women who migrate do have a job, because first they go up. Basically, they bus it and then walk it. And they get to points where there's no food, no water, nothing to drink. And you have to exchange, well, the women have to exchange sexual favors, which the men are not being asked to do. And very few of them are making the trip anyway. I know far fewer stories of women who've actually gotten to the other side of it. The thing that I found interesting is, if you look, so Fati is not Akan, and it's important to
Yeah, so Fati's mother is Akan, yeah, and her father is from Burkina, but settled in Ghana.
And that's a very important distinction to make, because if you look at writing down on Akan women, I'm thinking Madeleine Wall, who works on Akan women who migrate to Canada and leave their children back home to be taken care of. If you look at my own work with traders who would leave Ghana and go to Asia for a month and leave their children back home. Gracia Clark has a line in her book, Onions Are My Husband, where a woman says, nobody will work for my children the way a mother would. So we place primacy really on your economic activities, with which you then have the financial resources to look after your children. But it assumes that there are other women in your life who will take up the slack. So what Fati is confronted with is, even if she buys into that ideology, there is nobody to leave her children with. So at that point, then, as she says, I want my children to have better opportunities than myself. If I leave them with somebody who's too sick to take care of them, then it's useless. I actually have a paper titled something along the line. It's titled Good for Mothers, Bad for Wives. And it's a paper about the choice to migrate and how younger women in Techiman felt about it as opposed to their mothers-in-law. So I contrasted wives whose husbands were off in Libya with mothers-in-law, mothers of the men who were, and you found a generational shift, which I think is partly linked to charismatic Christianity. You know, charismatic Christianity has this thing about a man and a woman have to live in the same house. Traditional Ghana, we don't live in the same house as partners. So because we don't live in the same house as partners, this one is far away, it's okay. But this one, the two shall become one bank account, one kitchen, and so on. Exactly. It produces this schism where younger women who have bought into these ideas don't think that they should leave, right? Because if your partner leaves, then you are not in the same household and you don't have a Christian marriage. And so I remember a man who said it's better for us to be here eating gari than for him to go to Libya. Whereas the mother-in-law wants the son in Libya to bring the resources back. So what I think Fati's story points out is, as a mother, when you have to choose between the economic circumstances and the day-to-day personal care of your children, what do you do when there is nobody else to do the day-to-day for you?
That's really important. Thank you. Yeah, Fatima.
Yeah, so going back to the backstory of Fati's life, I think some of the influences of this decision came from a point where she didn't grow up staying with the mom. She grew up with an auntie, and she knows the dynamics of staying with anybody other than your parents. So at that point, she was like, no. Regardless of their financial means, she feels the bond is more important than all materialistic achievement.
Yeah,
so
but it didn't soften the criticism of her at
not
all.
at all.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Abdullah, did you want to speak at all to the different experiences of young men and young women on these journeys?
Yes. Like as Madam Akosua has said, when this journey, you could, even Ghanaians are even less. There are a lot of Nigerian women in this journey. Yes, so Ghanaian women are even less. There are a lot of Nigerian women. But when it comes to Fati, like you realize that the family now believes Fati to be the man. You understand? The whole story tells that Fati has turned to be a man, and they are hoping Fati will change the whole family and then the whole entire family life. So you could realize that the Fati brother and the sister, see, they were proud of Fati, and then just like me, because when I was in June, whenever I called in Ghana, they give the food to everybody of the family. Say, oh, Abdullah has called from Germany. Abdullah has called from Germany. You understand? So sometimes, like I become fed up because like it takes me a lot of money to speak to the whole family. You understand? So you can realize that Fati has turned as a backbone for the family. So the brothers were hoping that when Fati is able to settle in Italy, Fati can use the opportunity to bring them to Italy. So that was why they are complaining. You understand? It's not just, they are hoping that in future Fati can bring some of the family to Europe. Maybe if even you could realize that the sister said if Fati even don't send them anything, they are happy that Fati is in Europe. It's like in the community of where they are, they can boast that they have a sister in Europe. So these things alone is a pressure for someone like me when I was in Europe, because my family some of the family are proud of me for being in Europe. So this tells you that Fati was really a brave and a strong woman. That's what I can tell.
Yes. Yeah, so again, looking at our family system, there's a lot of expectation on firstborns. You know, so the firstborn has to make it, and the younger siblings have to follow. So there's a lot of expectation on Fati when she traveled out, like Abdullah said. She and then also she being there gives them some kind of family status over there. The fact that at the point the sister was telling me that, well, they don't even need the regular remittance. The fact that they're able to tell the community members that their sister is abroad is enough for them to feel that they've also made it in life. So these were some of the dynamics, in the community system. Yeah.
That's really helpful. I think we've got like 45 minutes, so I think we should open it up to questions and comments from all different perspectives we have up here on the panel. So Amma, I'll take maybe 3, and then we'll turn it back. And 2, and 3.
Hi, Fati. Thank you so much for bringing us the other Fati's story. Really illuminating. I just wanted to ask how Fati is doing right now, and what's the relationship between her and her eldest child. Does she have access now?
Yes. Sorry.
Well, let's get the other 2.
Oh, okay. Sure.
And then the second was. Oh, sorry, way after.
Hi, thank you. I had a question for Abdullah about, you had mentioned after the bakery started taking so-called black jobs, and just more about the sort of racial dynamics in Germany and Europe, where it's like, I think a lot of black Americans look at Europe like, oh, we go there and there's no racism anymore, but that a lot of stuff in Europe, I think, is based on African exploitation. And so if you could talk more about that environment that you're in after the bakery job, I'd appreciate that.
And then the gentleman here, and we'll go ahead and take.
Good morning. Yeah, some very interesting episodes in the Fati story. Then one that particularly struck me was when the sister and brother were talking about her stay in Europe, and it was a source of pride to them. The brother made a statement. He said, her coming back is for a reason. There's something behind it, because for them, they said the mother was the most successful person in her family. That is Fati's mother. All other kids in that family didn't do so well. But for their mother, for the fact that Fati has succeeded in going outside, has made the mother very special in the family. And now she's come back. That coming back, there's something behind it. It's not for nothing, And then, but you can see that the story ends well. The Fati is happy at the end of the day. She's happy that she has her children, and that even the husband has agreed that she keeps the children until he gets his papers. So what happens after he's gotten his papers? Is he taking the children back? At least if he's a responsible father at the end of the day, that will be fine for the family. But Fati again, do something I think that many women should learn about. When the boy wanted to say something about the father, that, my father has not been, he said, stop, don't go there. I think that is something that many should learn. The fact that there's divorce, some sort of divorce between them, doesn't mean she should maybe make the children say something bad about their father. Who knows? The father might get a good job, and he might take good care of the children with time. Now, in the case of Abdullah, I believe that your story can inspire a lot of young people in Tamale. Because your colleagues who might have been to secondary school like you and did not go to Europe but stayed, many of them would see that they have taken a very bold decision. What about them? I'm sure many of them will still be sitting at places called base, where they will chat and drink green tea and end the day like that. So it means that something should be done about inspiring others like you who might not necessarily have been outside, but who need to do something about their lives. And I think that you should be encouraged to push up others and make them do something very worth talking about.
I think we'll talk about that in a minute. But you can pass right in front of you.
Thank you. This was really illuminating. So I have a question for Fatima. So you started by saying that growing up you always wondered why going to Europe equal being rich. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about how the process of filming this documentary help you find an answer if it did. And also I'm curious, when did Fati make the trip to Europe? When did the story happen? Thank you.
Whoever would like to start and address any of the questions.
So the first question asking how Fati is faring. So she finally was able to relocate to Greater Accra, that is another town called Ashaman. So she just wants to get away from her community that knew her background, so just to start afresh. And when her first daughter turned 18, she found her way back to her mother, so she has all her 5 kids now with her, yeah. So the girl was able to find her mother and then get in touch with her for yeah. And then secondly, your question about how the status symbol attached, yeah. So during the process of making the film, I realized that most people's perception about Europe is what they see on the media, because it's like they've been fed with lots of nice images about Europe. For instance, there was a point that Fati said before she traveled to Europe, she never thought that hard cash was used to purchase anything in the grocery store or in the market, simply because what we see in our, let me say, in our films, hardly do we see people exchange cash, maybe even in the grocery store. So they think you should just have a card. I don't know whether there's money on it, by government put money on the card and you just go and then make transactions and all that. And hardly do they see inner cities or maybe dirty places. So the image is so well presented that there's this an idealized perspective, about how Europe should be. So if somebody is able to make it there, then it means that the person is of a higher status. I mean, idealistically, is of a higher status more than, those here, because he's been able to experience, in quotes, the paradise they've all been wanting to experience. So it is based on a little bit of ignorance about how the Western world is, I should say. They don't really understand the system there on how the real life is there, so they always see themselves as, okay, because we are struggling here and the nice images we see on TV, we don't see that kind of struggle that is being presented to us. Yeah. So it's more of, they have no idea, because when some people come and tell the truth and people still choose not to believe it, they are like, I want to go there and experience it myself. Probably you don't want me to also enjoy what you are enjoying over there. So let me go and experience myself. Then I can also come and tell my story. So it is extremely difficult, seriously, to convince people, to understand how it works over there. So during the process, it's all the girls, the women in the film, none of them, even sometimes I take the opportunity to talk to them about the realities, and they are like, no, there's nothing compared to their sufferings here in Ghana. So they actually want to make the trip by hook or by crook to understand the systems themselves. Yeah.
It's interesting, and Abdullah, I do want you to speak next, but the rest of Fati's story that we don't see in full is actually the same thing that Abdullah experiences, which is you can't go home. You have to go somewhere else, really, and start all over. That there's not a space for you at home if you've come back from Europe with nothing. So you have to go somewhere else. And I hadn't made that connection until you spoke about that.
Yeah, so
very powerful.
Yes, so Fati came back in 2017. So she was there in 2017, the earliest part of 2017, and then returned in 2017. Yes, so, and I got in touch with her around later part of 2018, 2019. Yeah.
Thank you.
I just want to chip in for that. And another thing, whenever somebody has the opportunity to travel out, most of the time the family will share his property. either he will succeed or not, whether she will succeed or not. Before you head, you have landed successful, they will share your property. So don't have hope that when you return back, the single room in your father's house or your mother's house, it is no more there. The clothes you have left, they have shared to people. So don't expect that when you come home, there is something for you. Now I will come to my brother's question about the racism, and then it's really tough. You understand, like compare like African Americans and Africans from Africa to Europe. Sometimes, like example in Spain, sometimes we have to fake like we're African American to get access to their like restaurants, their nightclubs, and then their beaches. Because like when you tell them that you are from Ghana alone, we will not give you the opportunity to have access to many things. So I have to be honest with you. So sometimes we have to fake like we are from America, or because most of them they don't speak English so much. So when you start speaking English, they will sometimes believe you that you are from America. So that is what you can take to have advantage to some of their things. Thank you.
So I'm thinking about this whole thing about why is it that when you go abroad, it's seen as such a big thing. I was speaking to an aunt once who told me this Akan proverb about esokobata. You have to move, right? And that is a very pervasive sort of idea in our environment. Mobility. You have to be seen to be on the go, and that is key to our. At least for Southern Ghana, it's a key part of our identity. And then you have Fati's very good point about you don't quite tell what your experience is when you go. When you come back, you share the nice parts about it. So it's not just the fact that clothing, you can buy whatever you want without a card. For yesterday at dinner, we had to tell somebody in Ghana, when you have a place, you've paid 2 years rent. So if I watch a film and you have a huge house, how am I supposed to know that you barely make the mortgage? In my mind, the whole thing, you don't tell people that the furniture is mortgaged, everything is $100 here, $50 here. So I'm looking at your kitchen, your furniture, I'm thinking, wow, if you have all of this, you're a millionaire. Because in our context, that's what it takes. Cash na hand, goods na car. Simple. You don't put things on your card. You don't go to the bank and get a loan for the car and a loan for the house and a loan for this. So the contexts are different, but that conversation isn't being had. There are many Ghanaians who charge, I mean, you go to visit. I'm going to Philadelphia next week. And I will come to you. And she wants to give you Twix, Mass, some 3 pence from the dollar store, and why am I taking this? This is just trash. Why am I putting it in my suitcase, making it heavy to go to Ghana? Because she charged it. She doesn't have $200 to give me, so I can come to All Needs and buy the thing and give it to her family. So I have to cart it. If I don't cart it, I'm not helping create this image of life is good. She knows life is not good. I know life is not good. But we have ways and means of creating this image. Right? And then it bursts people's bubbles until they see it, they don't think. When I did research with women who, because there's also the Middle East story that we are not talking about in this space. One woman told me, as for her, just the fact that she had been on a plane was good enough. That separated her from the rest of the people. She could say, I know about fasten seat belts and the smell in the plane and the food in the plane. She even thought the whole experience in the bathroom in the plane was something that separated her out from those who hadn't had that experience. So there's also the thing about travel and see. Whatever it is, you've seen it. And that sets you apart from the people who haven't made the trip. And it's a very pervasive sort of, is it a myth? Because people think it's actually true also in our space.
Any other comments on those questions, or we send it back out? Should we send it back out? Other questions, comments? Yes, one. There's one. And two. And Bright, 3, and then 4. Rachel, I'll get you in the next round. We'll see how that goes. Okay, thanks.
Thank you for this film. My question is for Fati as well. I'm curious where else you've shown this film and in what context and what the responses have been to it. And then also one for Abdullah. I'm wondering if you could talk more about your experiences having conversations with other people who have returned, and if that has provided any sort of balm or just opportunities to kind of dispel some of these myths that seem to be quite pervasive and common.
Thank you. So I just want to share a little experience on the gender dynamics of these trips. So when I got my PhD, when I had to leave for my PhD, I had a 4 months baby. I have a biological mother and I have an auntie who trained me. So many people don't know she's my auntie because she actually brought me up well. I'm her firstborn. So I went to her and I told her I need to make the trip because I have a PhD. So I would want her to take care of my son for me while I'm away. And she denied flat out. She's not taking my baby. She doesn't see why I married just a year ago. I have a baby and I'm leaving my baby, a 4 months old baby, to embark on a journey in Europe. I pleaded, I spoke to my dad, people spoke to her. She said, no, I need to be home with my husband and my son. But then I had a plan. My husband and we had a plan. So I had to go. And I have the opportunity, I'm not going. So I had to go to my biological mother and ask her to come and take care of my son while I'm away. Then I go every 3 months, I'm in Ghana. I make sure I'm here for 6 weeks for 8 weeks, just to be with my son. After a year, she agreed to take the son back because she realized I was coming back and I had no plans of staying. When I decided to come, then everybody told me not to come because it is better there than to return. So what happens to my family in Ghana? They will join you, but you have to find something to do there. But I had a plan. My plan is never to stay in Europe because, yes, race, there's a lot of racism, which one time I had to cry in a bus because there was dirt in the bus. We were 2 Ghanaians in the bus, and everybody thought we made the dirt, but we came to meet it in the bus. And they were reporting us. But we came to meet it, so I just decided to come. And everybody was like, with different reasons. My sister-in-law one time, I was on the phone with my husband, and I think he forgot to cut it. And my husband told them, oh, Ajo is coming back next in April. And my sister-in-law was like, she shouldn't come back. She shouldn't come back to be one of those PhDs with no money, staying in Ghana. Fortunately for me, I had an opportunity to come back too. But I think the idea, the whole state of one, as a woman, as a female, you are confronted with a lot of responsibilities of whether to let you go or not. And then when you go, then the statutes and other things also becomes other conditions where they want you to stay. It's very, very difficult when you have to make those decisions.
Thank you for sharing. There's someone who I can't. Yeah, I do. Yeah, I can't see who's back. Kina, after that.
Okay. Thank you very much for this film and for your perspectives. My question is for Abdullah. So you'd mentioned that you campaign against illegal migration. I wanted you to speak a bit about that, whether it's a formal sort of organization or initiative, and just wanted to hear more about that.
Okay, and then in the back, and I'm going to add you in, Bright, if it's quick, and maybe even Rachel too. And
thank you. This is so fantastic. I just wanted to comment about African Americans going to Europe and maybe not seeing racism. The thing is, I just think for class, the white people you encounter in any country as a black person or as an African are going to treat you better than they do their own black people. So when my mom and I moved from Ghana to Zimbabwe, this is also, I said, adjusting for class. The white Rhodesians treated us better than they did Zimbabweans. when you get to America, the white people there want to generally treat middle-class Africans better than they would African Americans. So we should stop this idea that there isn't racism somewhere. It is very much the opus operandi of white supremacy to make the visiting black person feel better than, quote unquote, their own black people. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Bright?
Abdullah, thank you so much for your presentation. As you were talking, I was reminded by Aikoama's book, Fragments. So one of the main characters returns, and people kept asking, oh, when is your car coming? When is your phone coming? But unfortunately, they did not use your term, like time will tell. I really like that phrase, time will tell. But one of the questions that I wanted to ask you, though, is can you speak about the community within, the Ghanaian community within Germany? Because as you were saying, people, the guy who you were using his papers would take half of your money. Because I do know sometimes people, other Ghanaians would threaten other Ghanaians who did not have papers that if you don't give them your money, they will deport you, all these. So if you can talk about that relationship that exists within the Ghanaian immigrant community, that would really be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Bright. And Rachel, are you? Yeah, there you are. Very, very back. And then we'll get responses from who'd would like to speak.
Thank you for sharing your stories. My question is quite an obvious question. So given the current situation in Ghana, could you share your feelings about the future? Thank you.
That'll be the concluding question, I think. Okay, so I'm going to turn it back over to whoever would like to speak to anything that's on the floor.
First, I would try to answer the first question, the question about like what I've done with the community, like did I able to convince them about the dangers and then the disadvantages of traveling illegal to Europe. Well, most of them, those I have opportunity to engage with, I have always tell them the stories of me and then the difficulties I've faced and then the reality there. But as sometimes some of them do not believe, as the director said, some of them will say like they want to go and see. So sometimes it takes a time to convince someone to know that like there's what we call a document you need to work in Europe. They just thought that it's just like agbogboloshi, and then when you go, you can just take something and then go and carry somebody thing, and then at the end of it, the person can give you 2, 3 cedi, 4 cedi. They believe that there is something like that in Europe. So it is difficult to convince them to believe that yes, they have to get the necessary documents from Ghana before even arriving in Europe. And then the another question about my role in campaigning against illegal migration. Well, honestly, I don't have my own organization yet, but I sometimes partner with different organizations, such like Ghana German Center for Migration. Sometimes whenever they have a program in Tamale, especially in the senior secondary schools, I used to come and tell them my experience, speak about my experience, and also tell them the advantages we have in Ghana if we are able to grab them, especially the local products we are producing in Ghana. Example like the patakari, the baskets, and so on. Because when you go to the world market and you see the value of a basket, you will prefer to be a basket producer than a teacher or a nurse. Honestly, when you go to the world market and then you see the price of a leather bag, you will be happy to be a leather producer than being something like teacher or something else. You understand? So I'm trying to convince them to know that when they grab these opportunities, they have control over themselves, and then they do things by themselves, and they are more independent. So it will also help them to have advantage even to travel legal to all these countries without any confrontation or without any problems. And then they can even earn enough money than someone living illegal there for many years. So some of them who even have the opportunity to go just a program or like a conference, when they also come back, I try to engage with them to let them join me to do this campaign so that people can really believe me. And the advantage I also have is for learning their language. There are some level and I have to speak Spanish to make the people believe that I have stayed there for long. Yeah, if not, they will not believe you. Maybe they say maybe you are just doing this work for the organization. So you have to speak the language to let them know that, oh, you have been there for long. Thank you.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to repose, if you're not going to answer it, is where the film has shown, because I wondered too if it's being shown to secondary schools, because it's such a powerful image of what happened.
Yeah, so we just started our impact campaign to see the reaction of people, and our first screening was with a university student who were young, and surprisingly, like, we were able to collect their responses, and then surprisingly, those who have been abroad was in favor of Fati's decision, you know, and those who haven't still believe that she should have stayed and still work, look forward to having her legal papers, you know, so it's the same old, she should have stayed there, yeah. And then I also did a screening for older women, you know. There were others who were, it was 50-50. Some were still of the view that she should have stayed and then brought money home for the welfare of the kids. So it was more of a generational gap. At the same time, those who have experienced Europe. Yeah. So that is basically, yeah. So that is our first screenings we did for Fati's Choice. So we are going to identify communities and stakeholders to show this film to, so that we can be able to measure and see the impact of the story. Yeah.
Will you be able to share with people in the audience how they are able to access the film or acquire the film?
Yes. So currently it's on Arte, the Arte platform, on YouTube. So I don't know. I think it's available now worldwide.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's available.
Yeah.
Open access.
Open access.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm.
Any other responses to? There's so many questions on the floor or comments, including about the current.
Right. Could you answer will you ask me the question once again, please?
So the question was me talking about the relationship.
Oh, right. That's a good one. Yeah.
Yes. Mostly, we those living there illegal without documents, you are always afraid to say anything concerning about someone who has a document. And one thing about that, those who are there for long, they always do everything to make you afraid of doing anything, speaking anything against them or against what they are doing, what they are practicing. So it's always difficult, and all the time they're fighting you, like, if you do this thing, they will deport you. If you do that, they will deport you. If you say something like this, or even sometimes if you say you want to go to the police station for some sort of thing, they tell you, if you go, they will deport you. So even sometimes, even they will even tell you that when you are coming the same street and then there is a policeman coming that street, go different street. If not, if they ask you and they say you don't have documents, they will deport you. So it's difficult to speak about it unless maybe if we have opportunity to have them here, then we can speak about it. Or people who have documents there and they decided to talk about it, it will be much easier. Thank you.
Akosua, did you want to add anything?
So there's a Ghanaian scholar based in Cape Town, Faisal Garba, who does a lot of writing on this particular question you're asking. So if you are interested. I wanted to take a stab at Rachel's question, but answer it very personally. I'm not sure if that's acceptable or not. But so I shared my earlier story of coming back 2 weeks. And this year I've looked for jobs abroad. But the interesting thing is, it wasn't because of the financial crisis. It was because I was feeling like the students are I'm not enjoying the teaching process as much anymore. and wondering, okay, what do I do? I've tried all the tricks I know, and I'm not getting far enough. But also, when I decided I wanted to, so I actually did go online and I looked for a job, but I didn't look in the West. I didn't look in the US. I looked in Botswana because as a child I spent time in Botswana. And I probably do have a romanticized view because I was a kid. But when I thought about where would I go, that's where I looked. So I did this in I think June or July. And yes, Ghana is hard now, but personally, my instinct is not to get up and go to the US, because in any case, academics in the US now, when they finish, it takes them forever to get a job, so who am I kidding? I'll just go from one bad soup to another smelly soup, basically. But I think that I do know for a fact, in the early 2000s, we had a situation in Ghana where return migration became a thing. In fact, I have a friend who went to a conference in California. They almost beat her up when she suggested to them that this Lee Ravenstein's push-pull theory that says you leave because everything is pushing you and you go because everything is pulling you, is no longer accurate because there are Ghanaians who are returning and there are Nigerians who are returning. So this push-pull theory has to be done away with, never mind that it's from the 1800s. And nobody believed her. But by the time it was the mid-2000s, we indeed see a large return of Ghanaians in Europe and the US. They've started to go back, preceding this period though. So there's been a return of the return migrants, so to speak. There's also something called cognitive migration, by the way, while we're at this. So there are some Ghanaians who've never set foot abroad, but they are more American than the Americans themselves. And so there's literature, there's a thesis that's just been done by Adolfo Ukubeko on the return of the cognitive migrants. When you actually then finally realize that you've been in Ghana for the last 30 years, so the earlier you get on with it, the better it will be for everybody. But I think the thing about the cognitive migration is it points to this very strong sentiment that as for Ghana, you have to leave. And given the current economic circumstances, people will try to leave. Legally, I'm not sure. I mean, the American embassy, the visa line, it's up to 2024. So if you're trying, even if you have the passport and you have the ticket, you can't go because it will take you until 2024 to get the appointment. So who will go are the Ghanaians who are dual citizens and can just up and leave and don't require the the literature on since Gaddafi's demise also, the trickling through Libya has changed dynamics quite a bit. So this doesn't, I know, I've been to a bus station in Techiman. They go on Thursday mornings every other week. It's like they are going to Libya. There's a bus, it's taking them. You have your gari, your shito, your bread. The parents have no clue. All the children have a network. They've sorted themselves out. They know when you get there, you do the lampa and all of that. So yes, some of that will happen, but there are real constraints to just sort of getting up and going also.
I see one hand here, and I thought we could go ahead and get at least one more question on the floor, and then we'll wind it up.
Just following what you were just saying, I wanted to ask the panel for their views in contrast to this conversation, or in relation to this conversation, because at the moment, definitely, in the UK, I can't speak to the rest of Europe, but definitely in Britain there is a strong trend for people, and a lot of the time these are people with Ghanaian heritage, maybe who are part of the elite in Britain anyway, like quite well-off people, but they want to come back to Accra, or they want to come back to Ghana, and it's seen as a kind of a return of a different kind, and a lot of the time working in cultural industries, some celebrity type people, and then other people who just work in arts and culture coming to Ghana and being part of that international conversation, but seeing it almost as a kind of very political move to come back and make a part of a life here. And I wondered how that fits in with the conversation of people coming back and having had maybe an equally, like, in a completely different way, a negative experience in Europe and then coming back for different reasons. How does those two things work?
Yeah, thank you for that. So complicating what the return looks like for some other. Does anybody want to take that on?
I think you are right about that, but you know there are spaces in Accra where when I go to I don't feel that it's Accra because it's a bubble, right? These people who are coming from the UK are probably working in circles where they are earning pounds, so doesn't matter what's happening on the ground. There are people who there are some people in Ghana who don't go to markets. They shop Game is leaving, so I don't know where they will shop, but ShopRite, okay, there's ShopRite and there's Maxmart, right? So if you go ShopRite and Maxmart, you don't know what's happening at Bobloshi. You sort of, you don't even know the price of fuel because you have this driver and he's just supposed to make it happen. You don't go, so you are sort of a bubble. Then in the evenings, you have all these restaurants in Laboni and Osu, and you can eat anything you want for probably half the price, right? And you get treated differently because you have an accent. So you are living a life here that you wouldn't even dream of living if you lived abroad. I have on my husband's side, he has cousins raised in Scotland. Huh? This girl grew up in Edinburgh. She has a boyfriend who lives in Ghana. Everybody is stressed out. But she comes and she goes and lives in one of these Airbnbs, and every time I call, well, you Letitia, it's like one restaurant, half the restaurant she's mentioned, I don't even know they exist in Accra. And she hop-lops for a month, and then so far as I'm concerned, she's not in Ghana when she comes to Ghana. She's in this, spatially, it's Ghana. But everything else about it, really, it's not Ghana.
Thank you for that question and for the response, which connects to. I'll bring Carina back to the long conversations that the four of us have had in advance of this, and how to complicate the idea of return, how to complicate the idea of global Ghana. So I want to wind this up. First of all, Carina is not here, but she's here in spirit, and she'll watch. I'm sure she'll watch the tape. And so I want to just end first of all by thanking her, because she's assembled what was really just an extraordinary panel where everyone was bringing perspectives, different perspectives, but also incredibly powerfully similar perspectives. So I want to first acknowledge her, and then I want to thank our three panelists. Fatima, I had a note here to myself. This is the second time I've watched it, and I was so, the first time I was trying to read the subtitles, and this time I could relax some, and I have to say it's so beautifully shot. And I just wanted to make a comment about the aesthetics of the film, which allow us to just, I could watch it again and again. And Abdullah, I want to thank you for sharing your story, which it resonated so beautifully with the film, with Fati's story, Fatima's story, of how she got interested in the story, and I know some of it is a painful history for you to remember, and we're just all very grateful that you shared it. And my sister Akosua, who always brings such insight to these questions that in this case I didn't realize that they were also some personal insights. So I really appreciate it, and I thank you all for your great questions and for joining us this morning.